Hey everybody, and welcome back. One question I get from my clients a lot is what exactly is actionable empathy and what is EQ via empathy? Because they kind of go together, but they're not exactly the same. And of course, the ultimate question is, how does that help me? It's a great question, but here's the short answer. It's not just about having empathy, it's about using empathy effectively to lead. Just having empathy is like having a treasure that you keep in a vault. You're richer for it, but it doesn't really do you any good. You know you have it, but now what? So how do you effectively use empathy to become a transformational leader? Welcome back to our discussion on effective leverage of your leadership skills with empathy and EQ. I'm Dr. R, and today we start to shift our focus into using empathy as a transferable skill. And I say skill because it's not just an emotion, it is a usable, learnable skill. In our first set of videos, we've been kind of laying the groundwork as far as background, and this is what empathy is, and that sort of thing. But now we really are starting to address it as a transferable skill, which is why we have the goal not just to have empathy, but to use empathy. Remember too, these videos aren't just for people who are already in leadership. It's also for people who want to develop their leadership skills, who hope someday to go into leadership, who just want to understand leadership better, or maybe just want to be able to lead themselves better. So now that that's out of the way, let's get started. How can I say this? Because I actually come at this from the 5 E's. I have 20 plus years of leadership experience. I have the expertise that's gleaned from this in academic, profit, and not-for-profit settings. I have the education, 3 master's degrees, and I'm working on my 2nd doctorate where my dissertation is actually going to be about leadership and empathy. And I know how to teach EQ through that lens of empathy. I actually bring all 5. Now there's this idea that leaders just lack empathy altogether, right? The cold-hearted boss, the Mr. Burns, that kind of thing. But in my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. These leaders actually have a great deal of empathy, but they just haven't been trained how to use it. They want to do the best by their people, but they don't know how. They can't effectively leverage it. To add to this, most leaders really aren't trained in how to use empathy, how to make it actionable. We've talked about soft skills, power skills, durable skills, emotional intelligence, and it's like, yeah, I have this and I have that and check, 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 but using it is a whole different thing. Like anybody who has ever done any exercise regime knows, having a bicycle or free weights or a treadmill is one thing. Using it is quite another. So before we go any further, let's start back again by just reviewing what empathy is so that we understand the construct, right? So number 1, you have to feel what another person is feeling. Now, this is actually known as perspective taking. You're looking at things from the perspective of another person. You don't just understand what another is feeling, but you understand it through their eyes, from their point of view, not your own. Perspective taking. This is important. Most children do start developing this around 18 months, but it's something that you can learn to do later in life. We're also saying that you're feeling what another person is feeling, but without taking responsibility for what they're feeling. So you're not there to fix it, and you're not there to judge them at all. In fact, judgment and empathy are mutually exclusive. What you really want to do is just understand and be there with them. That not taking responsibility part is important. Second, you feel discomfort because of what they're feeling. And as a response to this discomfort, you then take action. This action is known as compassion. And in essence, this is what actionable empathy is. All right? What empathy is not. Affective or emotional empathy, like we're talking about, is not cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy says, I logically get it. My brain gets a hold of it, but I don't feel anything. This is kind of like a machine understanding empathy, right? They can logically do it, but just like Pinocchio or Commander Data from Star Trek, They could never be completely human because they never understood the emotional side, right? So cognitive empathy is not the same as the empathy that we're talking about, which if you read, it's called emotional or affective empathy. It's also not sympathy. Sympathy actually has a negative reaction because when you give somebody sympathy, you're judging their situation because you're seeing what they're feeling, but it's from your experience. So you're looking at it through your eyes. It's a completely different thing. And people actually usually react very negatively to it because it's kind of interpreted as pity. And nobody wants to be pitied. It's not being weak. Having empathy does not make you weak. It also does not make you without courage. In fact, I would say it takes more courage to have empathy because you have to be vulnerable and open and be able to manage these emotions. So this idea that empathy makes you weak, we did a video on that and it's nonsense. I would even say that when you're in a leadership position, having empathy is tougher because you're not having empathy just for one person, you're also having empathy for the group of people that you are leading. This is a huge responsibility and it takes a lot of strength to be able to manage this effectively and actually make it actionable. You're dealing with human to human emotions. That's difficult, but for leadership, especially in the modern day, it is absolutely the correct action to take, especially with the rise of the machines and AI and all of the computers and things that don't have empathy. We're going to explore this in my next video, but something to think about. It makes it even more important to have these empathic, actionable leadership skills. So let's take a look at empathy from a different point of view, from a different angle. Let's pretend that your empathy is a Stradivarius violin. Expensive instrument, right? Like they've gone for like $20 million on the auction block. Extremely valuable. And the fewer of them that are around, right? Because when things get old, they die from use. There's fewer of them. So it's very, very valuable. But there are people that will buy these instruments and stuff them in a vault, in a climate-controlled vault in the dark. This is a musical instrument. It doesn't want to sit in the dark. The only way to make this instrument actually valuable is to pull it out and to play it so that you are connecting with other people through these sound waves. Empathy is the same way. It's not meant to be stuffed in a vault where it's protected and it's safe. Even though when you pull it out and you use it, you run the risk of damage. You run the risk of breakage. You run the risk of it being hurt. Otherwise, it can't give its energy back and forth, right? In the form of sound waves. The sound goes out, the sound comes in, we're connected through that sound. Empathy is exactly the same. You have to use it if you actually want to make connections. The point is that just having it is not enough. You have to use it for it to be effective and actionable. So now that we understand what is EQ via empathy? Is empathy a kind of EQ? I mean, some people lump them all together. Most people are like, I don't get it. It's all EQ, they're all soft skills, they all go together. But they're not. We're going to touch on this in our next video. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.